In the course of the long history of the FBI, it's certainly not uncommon for them to do house calls in the course of their investigations. What isn't so common and sparks some suspicion is when they go to the house of someone like a pro-life activist who hasn't committed any crime, not so much their house, but to the house of their mother to find out their whereabouts. Lee, what do you make of this?
Well, that's right, Brendon. One of the very strange things about this is it appears that federal law enforcement authorities are now policing First Amendment rights. Let's look at some details here.
I'm Brendon Fallon.
And I'm Lee Smith.
And we're over the target. So Lee, this happened in Virginia. We had two FBI agents, Ashley Roberts and Kathleen Brown, arrive at the mother's home of Elise Ketch, who is a pro-life activist. Let's take a bit of a look at this footage.
Yeah, sure. My name's Ashley Roberts and this is Kathleen Brown. We're both with the FBI.
Yeah, here the agents are asking the mother for her whereabouts. The mother calls the pro-life activist Elise Ketch, who says, "Don't tell them anything, Mom," and for good reason. Why is the FBI going after, or why is the FBI visiting the mother of this woman when they would have been able to get a hold of her without much problem?
Let's take a little bit more of a look at this footage that was captured at the door, because it's interesting the way that these FBI agents present their reason for being there.
Hold on just a second. Sure. She's not in any trouble. We just have information that we need to ask her about.
So she's not in any trouble. We just have some information we need to ask her about. I think anyone who hasn't been living under a rock understands the implication of this. It doesn't mean that she's not in any trouble. Alarm bells, generally, we see this in movies. If FBI turn up at someone's house or the police turn up at someone's house and they're not in any trouble, they just need to talk to them. There's usually something a little deeper going on. And in the context of concerns that America is heading towards is following a totalitarian trend, this smacks a little too much of the way the Chinese Communist Party operates. It's a common known term of the Chinese Communist Party. If they're investigating someone that is a person of interest, they put it in terms of when they're approaching their family, we might come around so that we can have tea sometime.
Really? I'd never heard that phrase. That's fascinating. That's what they say? That's what Chinese authorities will say to families? They say, we're going to come around and have tea sometime?
I have a friend who was involved in the democracy movement in China, and he's no longer living in China. He probably can't go back there without severely risking his safety, but his parents have received those kinds of phone calls and visits.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's fascinating, and we see it's the same sort of intent here, as you pointed out. The idea that, oh yeah, don't worry, she's not in any trouble. Then okay, so then why are you here? Why is the FBI? You're wasting your time if my daughter's not in any trouble. But yeah, I think it's the same thing. And of course, the Chinese Communist Party, right? They would be preying on family. This is what authoritarian states, especially those trending towards totalitarianism, do all the time. Right? They go after families. They try to scare families. They try to intimidate families, and they try to get families to turn against one another. Right? And that appears to have been part of the purpose here, going after the mother when they could have contacted her lawyer at any time. Right? That's the purpose, and that's a really good analogy. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. If that's what the authorities do in Beijing, this appears to be following a typical model.
Not so long ago, I interviewed Mark Ruskin, a former undercover FBI agent. He had something like 30 years experience in the FBI. And he spoke about this kind of pattern of behavior we're seeing with the FBI. And his understanding was that the targeting of so-called domestic terrorism, this is being influenced by political intentions. But back in the day, I think in the 80s, going into the 90s, he was working undercover on genuine investigations into white supremacist movements and genuine domestic terrorist threats. I wonder what has happened in the interim, and particularly pro-life activists, why target this particular segment of the population?
Well, I think what we're seeing is this is part of a larger trend in federal law enforcement. We're talking about political activists with guns and badges, right? This is not how the FBI is supposed to be. They're not supposed to be taking sides in a political debate, in any political debates, right? And they're certainly not supposed to be political activists. But what we see happening here, we spoke about the gentleman in Pennsylvania who was arrested in front of his family, dragged out in front of his family for violating the law for protecting his child at a pro-life demonstration. We see definitely that the Biden administration and the Democratic Party has been targeting pro-life activists and using the FBI and Department of Justice to do its work on that behalf, to arrest people and to make prosecutions, right? So this is a clear politicization and weaponization of federal law enforcement authorities.
It seems that pro-life activists have come under more scrutiny from the FBI since the very controversial Roe versus Wade determination by the Supreme Court. And it's generally the FACE Act, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, that is used by the FBI to justify these kinds of impositions. This act goes back to the Clinton administration, supposedly aimed at preventing people seeking abortions from being obstructed in pursuing that.
Yeah, I mean, all of these pro-life organizations, I mean, they're definitely outliers. And my understanding is that pro-life organizations, up until very recently, have been very happy to cooperate with law enforcement officials. We both remember there is a history of violence against abortion facilities, right? And no one wants that. Pro-abortion people certainly don't want it, and pro-life people don't want it either. It would be preposterous if you're pro-life to go around bombing clinics and hurting people. So this is why pro-life people have been very happy. I've spoken with a whole bunch of pro-life activists who said, no, of course we have cooperated with law enforcement authorities on this count. What the FACE Act, as you correctly state, is being used for. It's being used right now to target pro-life activists, right? The idea that an FBI SWAT team has had to sweep in on different families and terrorize wives and children of different pro-life activists is obscene. That's not about the law, right? That's not about the FACE Act. Again, this is about the FBI on behalf of the Biden administration policing the First Amendment and terrorizing political opponents. And also, of course, naturally, they're trying to show their own base. They're trying to show their own voters, no, don't worry, we love abortion. Even though we lost this case in the courts, even though there was the Dobbs decision, even though Roe v. Wade was overturned, we're still out there fighting. And to illustrate how hard we're fighting for you, for whom abortions are the centerpiece of your political ideology, we're arresting pro-life activists. We're not just arresting them, we're sending SWAT teams after them to terrorize their entire families. So that's what a lot of this is about. A lot of this is drama to terrorize people. But again, to have the FBI out there policing the First Amendment, Brendon, I think you're absolutely right to liken this to the activities of Chinese Communist Party authorities.
If you're enjoying this abridged version of this Over the Target episode looking at what's happening with the FBI, you can check out the full version on Epoch TV, where we touch on some of the sensitive topics that are a little too much for social media sometimes.
Watch us exclusively on Epoch TV. You'll find not only Over the Target, but all your favorite Epoch TV shows.